Gotcha.
I'll wait till everyone settles in.
All right, quiet please, and take your seats. We're back on track with the schedule now. It's fully recovered, so over to Kai. Thank you.
Hello everybody. Thank you for coming to my talk. My name is Kai Frost. I'll be doing a bit of a dive into the future and current technology around brain-computer interfaces and their potential for authentication. Now, I see you all looking at me, and I can tell what you're all thinking. You are wondering where I got this wonderful pen. And I will get to that, but first I want to talk about this wacky device on my head. So, there is a bit of a heads-up warning, pardon the pun here, this is a trigger warning. This talk will contain discussions about the surgical implantation of electrodes into living human brains. I have not included any medical imagery in this talk at all, but if this is the kind of thing that squicks you out of it, this may not be the talk for you. So I just wanted to put that up front in case anyone finds discussion of surgical techniques disquieting. So, who am I? I was forced to put this slide in. My work history is actually terrifyingly close to Drew's, so we're bookending today. I've worked 20 years in ISP industry. I worked across server administration, network and routing, programming. I made the switch over to cybersecurity about 5 years ago, and for the last 2 years I've had the very great pleasure of working for CrowdStrike in a variety of roles, and I now currently work as one of their principal security analysts. I've spoken at BSides previously. I talked about circumnavigating full disk encryption on Linux hosts and extracting AES keys from memory. I also spoke about phone hacking networks for fun and profit, mostly profit. This kind of all led to me being a bit of a massive nerd with an unhealthy fascination in authentication and futurism. So we'll go see where that takes us. What am I going to talk about today? So today I'm going to talk about what are brain-computer interfaces, what was the inspiration for this talk, what I set out to achieve, how I achieved it. We're going to do a bit of demo, and if anyone's been to any of my previous BSides talks, they know that this is a cursed option for me, so I have pre-recorded my demo this time. So assuming my laptop doesn't catch fire in the middle of my demo, which is a real possibility, we should see what happens. I'll then talk about the security considerations of using your brain as an authentication method for getting into systems. And then I'll talk a bit about the future of BCIs and what is on the horizon. This follows on actually remarkably well from that previous talk. I'm going to talk a little about machine learning models and their proper application as opposed to the horrible things they're used for today. And hopefully we'll have some time for some questions. So what is a BCI, a brain-computer interface? At its simplest, a BCI is a method of taking signals from your mind and translating them into a method that the computer can understand and react to. Technically, your hands and a keyboard are a BCI. They take the signals from your brain, translated via your fingers and a keyboard into signals that a computer can understand. We obviously don't think of that as a BCI. We've had those for years. We're very used to them. Traditionally now, there are kind of three areas that are thought of as modern-day BCIs. The first one is electrooculography, or EOG eye tracking. So that's a series of devices that are set up either as a headset or around your eyes, and they track where your eye is looking. These are prominent in modern VR headsets. They can be used for people who are disabled or quadriplegic, paraplegic, in order to allow them to select letters and keys on a computer screen. There's these little devices here, which is an electroencephalograph EEG, which is a brainwave reading. So what this is doing is it's got a series of electrodes and sensors all through it. This one has 14, and it's reading the electrical impulses of my brain through my skull. Now, skulls are pretty thick, some of us more than others, and that signal is pretty low fidelity. It's also very generalized because, nerve cells are tiny, these are big fat electrodes, so they're kind of getting the general firing of what's happening in different parts of my brain. We've got the motor cortex, we've got the prefrontal cortex, who are actually living our conscious lives, our thoughts. And so we're getting general signals out of the different areas of the brain. The high fidelity stuff is taking the EEG and actually putting it into a person inside your head. And this is used a lot in the medical realm these days. They put them in for direct reading of brain signals from the brain into a computer. And those are very high fidelity because you can actually get a sensor very close to a particular nerve cluster, and then you can use that to get very high fidelity signals out of that nerve cluster. The creepy thing about once you start putting it into the brain is that actually can become a two-way interface. So you can actually stimulate parts of the brain using that same electrode. Now that's very useful, It also has more nefarious possibilities, which we'll talk about later in the talk, and I'm sure are pretty obvious from the outside. So what are BCIs used for today? So probably the most generic and the example you'll be most exposed to are cochlear implants. So that's where they sink a single electrode into the auditory processing part of the human brain. Some of the more high fidelity cochlear implants have multiple wires, and they use that to stimulate the hearing part of the brain and allow people who have lost their hearing to regain the sense of hearing. It's a really good use for that. Deep brain stimulation is another area that they're used increasingly. They found that by sinking electrodes into certain parts of the brain and stimulating them with electrical pulses, you can do things like remove the tremors from people with Parkinson's. So they get this tremor, you just turn on the BCI and their hand goes stable. They can also use them to decrease the severity and occurrence of epileptic fits in some people. One of the more advanced areas we're using it in these days is quadriplegic computer control. Again, electrodes sunk into the brain, reading signals from the motor cortex of the brain. This can be used to control a cursor on a screen. This can be used to, in the more advanced implementations like we're seeing here, to control an electronic arm with much training. And so we can take people who have locked-in syndrome, people who are quadriplegic, paraplegics, and give them back the use of a limb. Some areas they're talking about bypassing the nervous system and actually directly stimulating the muscles to give them back control of their native body via a BCI implanted in the brain. Obviously, VR eye tracking, which we've already talked about. Some of the more nefarious uses for eye tracking are attention in advertising on computers. So your webcam can track where your eye is looking, and they can test the effectiveness in a browser of their advertising. What do you look at? What draws your eye? What's fascinating to you? And then they can improve those algorithms based on your attention span to make you really want your waifu. And with the headsets like the one I'm wearing, some of the more interesting applications are, there's a Twitch streamer who recently used one of these exact headsets to beat a final boss in Dark Souls. So she trained the model over time to understand forward, backwards, left, right, attack, and roll. Roll being the most important in Dark Souls, as we all know. And then defeated a final boss with hands off keyboard using only the power of her thought to control the character in game. That sounds impressive, but considering the year before someone beat a Dark Souls boss using a pair of bongos, it's probably less impressive. But it's still impressive nonetheless. So what was the inspiration for this project? I've been interested in brain-computer interfaces for years. I'm a futurist and a technologist, transhumanist. And Epoch, I'm on their mailing list, and they sent me their, check out our new cool headset. And I was like, oh, I really want one of those, and I've got no use case for it whatsoever. And my wife, who's a massive Whovian, looked at it and said, you know what you could do with that? And I said, what? And she played me a clip on YouTube from a Doctor Who episode. Any Whovians in the audience may be familiar with this episode. I'm going to play a little clip from it, which hopefully works with the audio. In this scene, a couple of the Doctor Who's companions are running away from a monster, as is their oeuvre in almost every Doctor Who episode. And they're trying to get into the control room of the TARDIS, which is protected with a password, as all good secure areas in a device spaceship should be. And the password is transmitted to them, and then they use it in the following manner.
I can see that Rory, I can see.
Do you think the nephew and it's still coming?
No. So where is this place?
This is where she told me to go. She said she sent me the passkey. What did you just say? Crimson 11, Delight, Petrichor. Said it.
Petrichor.
Said it.
She told you what it meant. The smell of white dust, remember? So, it's the meaning of the word.
The meaning of what?
Just like it's telepathic, say, think it.
It's coming.
But, Crimson 11, Delight, the smell of dust after rain. Crimson 11, Delight, the smell of dust after rain. Crimson 11, Delight, the smell of dust after rain.
Successfully authenticated into the TARDIS using just a memory of her concept of Crimson, her 11th birthday, her marriage, and the smell of petrichor. And I thought, you know what? I reckon I can do that. So I set out to actually do it for real. And I wanted it to be not me thinking the word 11th birthday, but my actual memory of my 11th birthday. These have enough sensors that pick up on different parts of your brain, such as your sensory organs, your skin, that you can, if you can vividly imagine the scene well enough and capture those signals and train an ML model to tease those out, the whole experience of that 11th birthday can be your password. The neat thing about that is that every human brain develops differently. They wire up differently. They're all unique as your fingerprint, as your neural networks grow. So I can tell you what my password is. It's a vivid memory of my 11th birthday. It doesn't help you in the slightest. If you put this headset on and thought about my 11th birthday, wouldn't unlock the system, because you don't have that experience of my 11th birthday and cannot have the experience. I can describe it to you in infinite detail. How little Bobby was crying because he lost musical chairs for the 11th time. The smell of the cake, the taste of the lemonade. You have to have that from my brain in order for this to work, which you cannot replicate. So my primary goal was to set out and see if I could do it with what we have now hanging around and actually develop that kind of an outcome. So the headset that I actually ended up getting was a 14-channel EEG headset with excellent fidelity. It's got really good readings. This is from Epoch. There are a few options at the time. They do a couple other headsets. They do the Emotive Insight, which is much, much cheaper. You don't want to know how much this thing costs. The Emotive headset is a 4-channel one. I didn't feel it had enough fidelity to really give me a good signal for a secure password, so I didn't go with that one. Then they do the Emotive Flex, which is much more of a research-grade headset. That's a pull-on skull cap, and you can put the sensors wherever you want and move them around depending on what you research. It's very close to the price for this one, and I thought about getting one of those, but I was planning to wear it in the talk, and I didn't really want to look like Tully from Ghostbusters. So I decided to go with a much svelter, cooler version of this. And if you go to Emotive, you'll notice that all of their marketing for these headsets have really attractive people wearing them and posing, looking thoughtful. So clearly they know their target market. So the data comes out in a format like this. It's 14 channels of analog signalings coming from the various electrodes, depending on what I think about, what I'm experiencing, what I do. And then those can come into a model which I can then train. So let's see if we can get a signal out of my brain. This is as close as I can get to a live demo in this. So I've got the headset on and, in theory, connected. So there we go. That's my live brain right now. If you look just down there at the purple, you can see the panic I'm experiencing by talking in front of a room of this many people. But I can actually do things like pinch my cheek. That hurt. There's my pain. I can stroke the back of my arm. And you can see that causes signal again in the purple line, which is right where my motor cortex is. I stop and I kind of relax a bit. Signal goes flat. Just by talking, you can see that I'm thinking. My very words are actually being translated into things. If I think about a bitter lemon, you get a massive spike there. So that's coming from my taste buds part of my brain. So I can use this data to generate a model of a particular thought. Now, let's get back to the thing. Hold on a second. That is the correct one. Nope. Oh no. Dropped out of presentation mode. Sorry, just 1 second. Hopefully this takes me back where I was. Yes, excellent. So in order to actually get any sense out of that noise, we have to train the ML model. So if I think about my 11th birthday sitting at home on my desk in my nice quiet office, you get a certain lot of signals. If I then do it while smelling some incense, I get a different set of signals. But my thought's still in there, somewhere in the noise. If I hop on one foot while doing it, I get a different set of signals. If I drink a lemonade, if I'm presenting in front of 500 people. So what you have to do is you have to train the model. You say, I'm thinking the thought, and you hit record, and it records that stream, and then you do it over and over again. I had to train it about 15 times to get it to work well with this project. And what it does, it looks for the commonalities amongst all the spikes and dips in the signal. It looks for the things that are mostly the same between the two of them. Puts into it's quite a fuzzy logic, so it allows for deviations between. If I don't quite remember the sound of Bobby's crying as loud as it was, then it allows for certain deviations in those areas. So it took about 14, 15 for me to get that and find the statistical similarities. And so what I did then is, once you've got the model trained, you can think the thought and it'll go bing, bing. You've thought the thought, which isn't very helpful. You want to get that data out of the Emotive software. It's a black box that brainwaves go into and a the thought happened comes out of. They have a bunch of ways to interact with the machine learning model. They have two main interfaces. One is OSC, which for some reason they chose the Linux Open Sound Control format. I get it because it's a high fidelity, high speed interface for transmitting data. You can basically take that and feed that over any kind of secure format you want, over SSH to another box to get the output for that. They also offer this Cortex API, which they charge for. It's a web API, no HTTPS. I decided not to go with that. So what I've used is the OSC format, which I can then pipe to any device I want over some kind of secure tunnel. So let's look at what the OCS stream looks like. So I need to go to here. So this is a VM running on my Windows box. This can subscribe to the OSC stream, which is being put out by the host machine learning model. And so neutral is it's not detecting the signal of my memory. I don't know if this is going to work because I have not trained the machine learning model in front of a bunch of people, so we'll give it a go. Nah, I didn't think it was going to work. Again, this is too outside of the machine learning model. If I trained it about 3 or 4 times, standing in front of OUP, oh, it came through. That was me thinking the thought. So it does come through eventually. This is the problem. Now try stop thinking about the thought. I'll talk about that in a second as well. Why does it do this to me? Every time. Cool. So using that OCS stream, I now have a way of getting my thought out of the machine learning model, and I want to get it into my system for authentication. Linux authentication works via a subsystem that has a thing called the PAM. It's not the kind of PAM we were talking about yesterday. It stands for Pluggable Authentication Modules. They made it very generic, as the Linux people like to do. And so you can create your own authenticators, which you can then tell, say, sudo or your desktop when you log in to go to those authenticators and work through them. And you have things that are required or sufficient. And you can say things like, I want a smart key plugged in. I want the password to be right against, etc. password. And once all those criteria are satisfied, PAM hands back to the requesting service, authentication successful. So I used a PAM module called Python PAM, which is a nice little handy module that allows you to write a PAM module in Python, nice and easy. And then you can basically do anything programmatically that you want to do, such as listening to an OSC stream. And then based on finding that line in the OCS stream, you can then hand back an authentication success to the requesting device. So this is a bit of code that's the demonstrator code that came with it. I created a PAM module that subscribes to the OSC stream and returns authentication OK when the thought goes past in the stream. I then modified the PAM configuration for both sudo -i and for GDM, which is the desktop login manager for Linux, to be sufficient for PAM Python, PAM success. That's what I just called my Python script. So when the thought goes past, that's sufficient to authenticate. It doesn't matter if it matches any other criteria, just the minute that thought happens, it authenticates. So this is where the demos are recorded, I'm afraid, because I didn't want to risk standing in front of you guys and going, the 11th birthday, it's not working. So this is recorded. So what we have here is, I've tied into sudo. Over here, we've got the OCS stream, so we can watch it. I'm going to try and run sudo, and it's going to sit there and wait for me to think the thought. So just try and authenticate sudo. A boring amount of time passes while I think about thought, I think, and now I'm authenticated as root on the Linux box. And to show this ties into authentication for the full desktop as well, now the PAM module, I modified the GDM login manager to authenticate against that PAM module as well. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on a login. Normally you get a password prompt here, but I've disabled the password prompt PAM module and replaced it with my Python module. What you'll see is I'll put my hand on my thing and then I move my hand to show when I start thinking the thought, just to kind of give a bit of a signal that it was working. So I try and log in. It sits there. Now this laptop I'm running this on is a bit slow, so even when it starts to authenticate, it takes a while to drop the desktop. Now I start thinking the thought. It's now authenticating. And if you give it a second, because this machine is as slow as pig shit, I'm logged in, just like that. So this is a security conference. Let's talk about the security considerations. So the potential attack vectors for this are you're only as secure as your OCS stream, obviously. If anybody can get into that OCS stream, they can just inject, yeah, sure, you thought that thought, into the OCS stream, and then you're authenticated. So that's why I'd recommend doing it over some kind of secure medium, SSH, TLS, encapsulated in HTTPS or something. This is a problem that's well solved. We know how to create a secure tunnel. If it's on the same machine, it doesn't matter because it's just talking locally. But if you want to authenticate remote devices via thoughts, like you basically have an AD for thoughts, which has all the machine learning models on it, that the signals are sent to, and then they're processed and sent back as authentication requests. You just want to secure those tunnels. You could, in theory, this is a USB receiver, you could in theory record and replay the raw data coming from my headset into thing. So you know I think the thought, you just record that raw data and then feed it back into the machine learning model at a later date. This headset does not authenticate the headset to the USB key. That would have to be resolved going forward for this to be considered a truly secure method for authentication. Is PAM an attack service for this? I mean, in order to modify the PAM configuration files, you need to be root on the system. You're already root, who cares? The problem I discovered early on is the don't think of a pink elephant problem, and this is something I discussed with one of the other attendees earlier, is one of the interesting things legally about this as an authentication method is in many countries you can be compelled to hand over biometric data. You can be compelled to give your fingerprints, you can be compelled to log in, legally compelled to log into your phone if it's got a thumbprint reader, but in some places you cannot be compelled to hand over something that's in your head, so your password. And that requires a court order or a warrant or things like that. Now, what happens if I can tell you my password and it doesn't help you? Give us the password to your laptop, my 11th birthday. Good luck. They can sit down and think, guys, 11th birthday, all they like, and it's not going to help them at all. So can I be compelled, because it's in my head, to hand over my thought? Can I be compelled? Can they sit me down, put a headset on my head, and force me to think the thought to authenticate against me? Can I be court-ordered to authenticate against my device by thinking the thought? How can they tell if I'm doing it wrong or right? I'm sorry, officer, I'm panicking right now. I can't think of it properly. That's why it's not working. And I'm really, singing, somebody once told me. You're all welcome. So this led to the pink elephant problem, which is I put the headset on, and I was setting up those videos, I was like, okay, don't think the thoughts, I've got time to get them, I'm logged in. All right, it's cool, log out. Okay, I'll get the recording set up, don't think I'm logged in. So it's actually remarkably difficult not to think the thought when you don't want to think it. Initially, when I recorded the videos, I just sung nursery rhymes in my head until I was ready to authenticate and then the thought. But it actually is, funnily enough, solved by that Doctor Who episode, which is what you need to do is you can train the model. It doesn't have to be one thought, it can be a sequence of thoughts. I can think about my 11th birthday, a red flag, the smell of petrichor, and you're very unlikely to randomly think about those three things in a row. And even when you're trying not to think about them, it's actually much harder to accidentally think about three things in a row. So I'd solve that problem by making it a sequence of thoughts. Something which you can't actually tell in the video is it's not just the memory of my 11th birthday, because I found that was too easy. I'm actually clicking my tongue as well in my mouth when I think the thought. So I'm actually adding a physical element to that password as well. So I can say it's the memory of my 11th birthday, but you also have to click your tongue. The pros of this is you can't replicate the neuronal growth pattern of my brain. So it's incredibly hard to crack. Thoughts can be strung together or paired with physical sensations, as I just described. The brute force surface of that is humongous. It's 14 channels, but that's not like 14 ABCs. It's 14 analog signals. And depending on the fidelity of the headset, that could be anything between 0 and 1,000. So you've got 14 times 1,000 possible signal levels. It becomes more possible combinations than there are atoms in the universe to brute force that thought and hopefully match the machine learning model that I've created. And as I spoke before, the can you be compelled to think a thought issue, which is I think a big pro. It really is one of those things that I don't think's been explored in law yet and is coming, and we need to think about it. Because when these become more common and when we start talking about implanted brain-computer interfaces, which will make our lives easier in a multitude of ways, I think that authentication via a thought, a memory, will actually be the next logical step. If you can secure the transmission paths, which we know is a solvable problem, it's a very secure methodology for authentication. It's just better than anything else. It's something you have, and it's a biometric in one. It's not a token. You don't need anything. No one else can duplicate it. It's an excellent authentication methodology. So the future. How am I doing for time? Oh, great. So the future. So where we go from here is obviously implantable BCIs. There is a few options now for that kind of thing. Obviously, if you're registered in one of the medical, if you're physically disabled and you're measured in one of these studies, you get a BCI, and they're working on training hands and machine learning models for that. But commercially, we obviously have Neuralink, and this totally not scary machine that rams electrodes into your brain that they've created. It's basically a giant sewing machine that can ram 1,000 needles into your brain in under a minute through a small hole they drill in the top of your skull. They've done this in pigs already, and they can make the pig move its back leg. This is the problem. This is where we start to get terrified, because once they're inside your head, they're two-way signals. Do you like your waifu, or does Elon Musk just want you to like your waifu? Do you really want a Coke right now? Are you really thirsty? Or is he just stimulating the thirst portion of your brain? So that is a consideration we need to take. But implantable BCIs here, this is their current chip. It's got, I think, 14 channels, 15 channels, but they're going up to 1,000 is what they want. So this little disc sits just under your skull, on the top of your brain, and then they're all fed into the different parts of your neural cortex. It's much like this is, but just much higher fidelity. So you're getting thousands of signals, you're getting very high definition readings of the surrounding areas, and it's two-way, which is a bit concerning. I love what he's doing with SpaceX and stuff like that, but I'm not sure I want an Elon chip in my head, is all I'm saying. And I'm a futurist, and I'm keen on having a chip in my head. I really want one, but I'm not sure about that. Fortunately, there are other opportunities. Also, we don't know very well what the damage caused to the brain by having it rammed through the meat of the brain is. It's going to destroy cells on the way. In the pigs, they don't suffer any brain damage so far. It's fine. And they can remove them and put them in, but repeated damage and scarring is a real concern there. Fortunately, there's an Australian company that's doing a much better job and is ahead of Neuralink. This is a company called Synchron. And they've got a brilliant idea. Instead of ramming wires into the brain, what already permeates all of the brain? Your blood system. It goes to all parts of your brain. A problem we've already solved is a thing called stents. If anybody's had anyone who's had a stroke or a heart attack, you know what a stent is. It's a little mesh thing like this that they insert in through a vein, either in the armpit or in the inner thigh, and they go to the vein that's closed up, and they push the stent in, and it just opens up the vein a little bit. Very safe. They've been doing them since the 70s. You can remove them, you can put them back in, they don't cause any damage. And so instead of just putting in a stent, put an electrode at each of the junction points from the stent, feed them in through the jugular vein, and just feed them up into the brain via the blood system that's already there. No damage, no punching holes in the brain. They can be removed if you get a software upgrade. Synchron, so it's done like that. They just feed them into your brain. There's a highway already there. And those are also two-way. They can stimulate the brain around them, and they can be really tiny. The picture looks quite large, but it is actually much smaller than it looks. And so you just feed those all through the brain and then have two-way communication from that. And they have moved into human trials. I think they've got one human trial now. And they're based in Melbourne. So go Australia. Not punching holes in people's brains. So yeah, that's kind of what the future we have right now. It'll only get better, smaller, and faster. So be prepared. Are there any questions? I think I saw your hand first, sorry.
I have one just around the authentication side.
Yes.
You mentioned about being compelled to think thought.
Yes.
Is there any possibility you could, or have you experimented with changing the possibility of thought? Like say, your last thought is, I'm not being compelled to give this password. And the fact that you are being compelled to change it.
Yeah, I don't know that you could do true or false. I mean, you could obviously try bashing hitting against the wall and erasing the memory of your childhood. But no, I don't know that you could do that because it's just a further thought, really. They're saying like, think I'm not being compelled to think this thought. Whether or not it's true or not, the interface can't tell. It can only tell that you're thinking it. So yeah, sorry, you had a question here?
Have you tried the same thought to log in on multiple different days? And I'm asking.
I have, yes.
You mentioned you were clicking your tongue as an extra physical stimulus.
Yeah.
But then it's like, if you're a bit colder in that room or if the sun's a bit bright in your eyes, that changes.
It does. And that's why you train the model over and over and over again. Like I cheaped out. I did it 50. It takes 60 seconds for each training session. So I did it 15 times. I got bored. But ideally, you want to try and train the model in as many different situations as you can. That training period is slow at this point in time. When you have the implanted ones, the training period can be accelerated. It's much faster because it's higher fidelity. But if I was being a good boy, I've trained it a couple of times here, and then I have a new experience. And it just adjusts that model so it has a wider range of tolerances for, like, you're on fire and you're thinking about your 11th birthday and you really need to unlock your fire extinguisher right now. You want that to be well trained so that it can understand you in a variety of different situations. It starts to understand what's relevant signal and what isn't. So you don't have to train in every situation. Just the more you train it, the more it knows how to discard the irrelevant. Yes.
Talking about training, you mentioned it's a machine learning model. So usually machine learning needs like a volatile. How is big teams like make it like enough?
It's not. They recommend 30 plus for a goodish training period. If you want to go real good, I mean, I think the lady who did the game, she trained at 60 times per movement to get really high fidelity. The more is better, basically. Yeah.
So this becomes like.
Sorry.
The training becomes.
Yeah, for adoption. At the moment, like I said, because it's slow at the moment, yeah. Sorry. Yes, you had a question there?
You could obviously read the thoughts, but are there any implications for treatment of Alzheimer's, things like that, background of the thought back in? If you want to remember your own birthday when you're 17, Alzheimer's,
Sorry, so the last bit?
if you hit 17, you've got Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
and you put that thought back in.
No, not with these things. I'd say I don't think so. I mean, like, basically, most of the research around Alzheimer's is preventing the damage in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't think you can rebuild neural pathways. We don't have the technology to rebuild neural pathways at this point in time that are lost. Yeah, sorry. I have one more question.
One more.
Yes.
Yeah, see pipe connection.
Yeah.
When you're doing authentication, that's presumably always open, right? So is it possible that you could begin thinking your thoughts to authenticate it at the time before you do your reduce that delay a little bit?
Yeah, you could have a authentication in the pipeline, I guess you could. But I mean, like, as I said, because I've trained it quite lightly, it takes a second to tease it out. Again, with more training, the faster it picks it up. So that was the problem. I think that's it. So
Yeah, that's
thank you very much, everybody.